My name is Taylor Krause, and I did my presentation on fetal programming and its effects on beef carcass quality. So, fetal programming is essentially the idea that a maternal stimulus at a critical period in fetal development has long-term effects on the offspring. Nutrient restriction is essentially a reduction in nutrient supply during a critical window of development. So there are many scenarios that can lead to nutrient restriction, but in ruminants, the two most likely causes are going to be altered maternal nutrient supply and environmental conditions leading to stress responses. Both of these scenarios are often encountered within extensive beef cattle systems. Extensive systems are designed so that the majority of nutrients come from grazed forages. Forage quality, however, can be poor during dry and winter seasons, and especially during drought conditions. Often these low-quality forages occur during gestation and lactation, thus nutrient inadequacy is common. Now, supplementation can be utilized to combat the nutrient deficiency in grazing cattle. However, producers rarely implement this strategy during early to mid-gestation. It's more often implemented during late gestation once the damage has already begun. So a little bit about the idea of fetal programming itself. The extent and effects of nutrient restriction depend upon the timing of the restriction, the severity of the nutrient deficiency, and/or the length of time of the nutrient restriction. Because each tissue has a different critical window, meaning that the nutrient restriction will alter the development and function of whichever tissues are undergoing rapid growth and differentiation at that time. Some of the negative impacts associated with nutrient restriction are listed below. Obviously, mortalities are not good for a producer economically. Dysfunction of the intestinal and respiratory systems is going to lead to illness that can hinder the calf's performance. Slow postnatal growth could lead to reduced weaning weights. Increased fat could be good or bad depending on the location. Fiber diameter will impact tenderness and the appearance of the meat, which could overall reduce the meat quality and acceptance. The negative impacts associated with restriction are often determined by which critical window was targeted. During early gestation, nutrient partitioning is focused on placental growth and vascularization, development of the vital organs, and differentiation of stem cells. Nutrient restriction during this time is more likely going to compromise function rather than growth. As gestation progresses, nutrient partitioning shifts its focus from development of vital tissues to growth of carcass tissues, such as fat and muscle. During this later gestation development, tissues such as fat and muscle are still outranked by tissues such as the organs. Thus, the late maturing carcass tissues are generally more susceptible to the effects of maternal nutrition, as they're the last priority for nutrients, yet they play a very large role in fetal growth. Nutrition during the previously mentioned critical windows is crucial for proper fetal development. Interestingly enough, the nutritional requirements of the dam actually change during pregnancy. It has been shown that the dam's requirements are quantitatively impacted by fetal nutrient uptake around mid-gestation, with the fetus contributing to additional requirements. These additional requirements need to be accounted for when nutritionally managing these gestating cows. Some studies have shown that the nutritional requirements of a spring calving cow grazing dormant range during late gestation typically exceeds the nutrient value of the grazed forage. This lack of nutrient availability aligns with the additional nutrient requirements of the dam during late gestation. This is a prime example of how maternal nutrition may be inadequate during gestation, but it is not necessarily just during gestation that adequate nutrition is needed. The maternal plane of nutrition postpartum has been shown to affect the calf's growth through weaning, and thus the maternal plane of nutrition is still programming the calf even after birth. It is also important to note that the nutrients taken in by the cow vary greatly, whether it's her total nutrient intake via how much she eats or it's the specific nutrient availability of the feedstuff. These variations of nutrient intake and production systems can be attributed to dietary quantity and/or quality issues, deviations in consumption, and environmental conditions such as stressors. In situations like this, protein supplementation during gestation is a viable option for producers to reduce the effects of nutrient restriction. The idea behind supplementation is that the best chance at correcting the deficiency would be to add ruminally undegradable protein, because forage already provides adequate ruminally degradable protein. Switching gears a little bit to look at the effects of maternal nutrition on the offspring's nutrition, it is believed that permanent changes in postnatal metabolism can be induced by the maternal dam's nutrition. A better understanding of individual animal variation due to that dam's plan of nutrition could allow for management strategies to be implemented to improve overall profitability of the group. It is important to note that the fetal gastrointestinal system in nutrient-restricted animals may also be programmed to be more efficient at extracting nutrients. Thus, there is a potential for difference in nutrient transfer efficiency between calves from restricted versus non-restricted cows. Like I've been mentioning, maternal plan of nutrition during gestation affects fetal growth and development. But now we're going to take it to the next step, because that ultimately affects carcass characteristics. As far as muscling goes, the fetal stage is crucial for skeletal muscle development because no net increase in the number of muscle fibers occurs after birth. On top of that, maternal nutrient restriction has been shown to reduce the number of muscle fibers while increasing the number of nuclei, thus leading to a larger fiber diameter. Larger fiber diameter is associated with less tender meat and is not as visually appealing for the consumer. Some studies have found differences in muscle fiber type depending on the maternal plan of nutrition. Muscle fiber type not only impacts the growth potential but also the end product quality. Often the low energy diets cause the offspring to have fewer glycolytic fibers. The ratio of glycolytic to oxidative fibers will essentially affect meat color, tenderization, water holding capacity, and overall acceptability. When it comes to fat, internal and external fat are economically important as they are related to the carcass grading. Intramuscular fat is good, back fat, visceral fat are ideally minimized. Unfortunately, it's not that simple, but with the continued research, it may be possible to nutrient target fat deposits. In general, adipogenesis is initiated around mid-gestation. Nutrient restriction tends to increase adipocyte size, while improved nutrition tends to increase adipocyte number. According to some research, the effectiveness of nutritional management on altering marbling is most important during the fetal stage, followed by the neonatal stage. Yield grades, on the other hand, are essentially a measure of lean to fat in the carcass. Lower yield grades means more lean meat, which is good. Some research has seen increased yield grades, which is bad, in the nutrient-restricted offspring. Last but not least, the organs are usually not a major concern for a carcass standpoint. Some research has been showing that the organ weights do not vary based on maternal nutrition. However, it has caught some attention that the organs may not function properly. This concern is that the nutrient restriction in the dam could alter the offspring's ability to transfer nutrients through tissues such as the intestines. When a lot of people think about ruminant nutrition, their first thought may be of a cattle in a feedlot. But in reality, that animal's nutritional requirements date back long before they step foot in a feedlot, or even before they step foot on the ground. Fetal programming is a somewhat new topic of research that ultimately affects every animal from the time they are an embryo to the time they are a steak. That being said, it's not that far off of an idea to think that you can manipulate the carcass value of an animal while it's still in utero. One place producers often want to improve their performances through the carcass. It's well known that through decreased growth rate and suboptimal carcass, it costs the producers millions of dollars annually. Thus, utilizing fetal programming to optimize offspring performance could potentially increase carcass profitability. A better understanding of fetal programming could one day lead to management strategies to improve marbling and grass-fed beef, thus improving the palatability and expanding its consumer demand for the beef industry. I personally find the idea of fetal programming to be intriguing because it gives us an opportunity to begin essentially building an animal 9 months before they even hit the ground, which for beef cattle is 50% of its lifetime. Fetal programming also gives me the opportunity to combine my interest in nutritional management of beef cattle with my research in meat science. It is crucial from a meat science standpoint to assess the production practices that lead up to the end products being produced.